Hi, fourth grade friends. We're going to go over our homework from chapter 6 and 7, and then we will go back a page and do this page after we do our reading today, and then we will go through our homework questions. So go ahead and get your chapter 6 and 7 questions out. I'm going to zoom in. One more. Perfect. All right, I need to do this, though, actually, first. Whoops. Coming, almost there. Let's see if it opens to that same page. I figured it wouldn't. Scroll, find your chapter 6 questions. Perfect. All right. So, we needed to describe the events of chapter 6 in 5 detailed statements. And these are just the ones that I came up with. You should have something similar. You should at least have these, I would say. So it starts with Dominic talking to the old man on the phone. Something along those lines of Dominic talking to the man on the phone. Then we learn the man's name is Francesco Candiano. And I don't want that to happen. I'm going to a period. After we learn that Francesco felt alone at Ellis Island also. Remember, he was trying to comfort Dominic and tell him how he felt alone there too. Francesco came from Italy, and he might have talked about how beautiful Italy was too. The last thing that I would say that you should be at the very end was Dominic fell asleep. Dominic fell asleep, and we start with our next chapter with how things have changed for Dominic. And a full sentence answer would be something along the lines of Dominic woke up somewhere new. Or he couldn't stand up when he was going through the beginning of it, but now he can. So I wanted you to describe in detail what Dominic saw when he opened his eyes. Because Elvira Woodruff, the author, used so much detail, even though that was the shortest chapter ever known to man. She fit so many details in there that you should have more than just like trees, grass, sea. That's not a fourth grade level answer. And you know that. So make sure that you gave your very best work. So you might have said Dominic saw and smelled a lot of things. He smelled lemons, felt grass and flowers, and he was sitting on a cliff. There were red roofs with whitewashed houses, and a sparkling blue sea. Really wanted you to use as many words as the author did. She said sparkling blue sea, red roofs, whitewashed houses. That's what good readers do. They look at and they pay attention to those details that the author gives. And when they're asked about it, they can go back and find those details and use those same details. All right, so we will read 8, 9, and 10 today. We'll finish up this page for homework. And then we will talk about this page for character traits. We're going to meet some new characters today. So let's go ahead and find chapter 8 first, and we're going to read through these, and then we'll come back to this. So keep this handy. So we last left the very end of chapter 7, remember? Dominic stared. The old man's words suddenly came back to him. All the beauty you could want for a lifetime was in that little village. So we kind of drew the conclusion that he is in Avellino in Italy. We figured that out yesterday. Let's read and see what happens when he's on that cliffside. "Where am I?" Dominic cried aloud. "Where am I?" "If you get any closer to the edge of that cliff, you'll be in the sea," came a voice behind him. Dominic immediately recognized that the words he was hearing were in Italian. One of the foster homes he lived in was in an Italian section of Brooklyn. The people in his favorite bakery spoke Italian all the time, but he had never been able to understand them. And yet, somehow, now, he understood every word that was being spoken. He spun around to find a thin boy about his own age standing a few feet away. The boy was wearing brown woolen shorts and no shirt. His skin was deeply tanned, and his shoeless feet were dirty and stained. 2 small dead canaries dangled off the string that was tied to the belt loop of his shorts. Who do you think that this could be? Do you think it's Francesco like I do? I think so, because he has the dead canaries, like he talked about eating the canaries. And remember he said they were so poor they had to share a pair of shoes? This boy doesn't have shoes on either. Maybe it is him, but how could that be? He wasn't just a voice recording. Let's read and see. Beside him stood 2 younger boys. The youngest, a boy of about 7 years old, had a head of blonde curls and what appeared to be a small, brightly painted accordion slung over his shoulder. Do you know what an accordion is? That musical instrument that you kind of go in and out with, almost like a slinky, but it makes music. The other boy looked a few years older. He had dark hair and dark eyes. Over his shoulder was a coil of thick rope netting. Both of the younger boys were dressed much the same, in raggedy shorts and dirty shirts. As they came nearer, there was a strong scent of sweat mixed with smoke. Their grimy arms and legs were covered in scratches, and their hair was matted and unbrushed. "Are you hunting in our territory?" the oldest boy demanded. "Me?" Dominic sputtered. "Hunting? No." He was equally shocked to hear his own words come out in Italian. The 3 boys circled about him. "His clothes are strange," the youngest boy said, pointing to his t-shirt. "Did you paint that sea monster on your shirt?" "What?" Dominic asked, looking down at his Tyrannosaurus Rex on the front of his shirt. "No, it's not a sea monster. It's a dinosaur." The boys grew quiet as they stared. "What is a dinosaur?" the oldest boy asked. "I've never met a kid who didn't know what a dinosaur was," Dominic answered. "Dinosaurs are animals that lived long ago in prehistoric times," he told them. "This one on my shirt is a T-Rex. He was one of the mightiest dinosaurs ever. Haven't you heard of T-Rex?" The boys shook their heads. "Look how clean his hands are," the boy with the net on his shoulders said, picking up one of Dominic's hands and examining it. "He must be the son of a padrone, one of the bosses." Right now I'm making a connection to one of our books that also talked about how clean hands might have been. The City Slickers from Stone Fox. So you can think the padrone, one of the bosses, probably usually somebody rich, right? "What is your name and what village is your family from?" the older boy demanded. "My family?" Dominic was too dazed to make another story up. "They're all dead," he said. "My name is Dominic. I have no family, and I don't know where I am." On hearing this, the boys softened and looked at him with great sympathy. "Our village, Avoletto, is down there," the youngest boy said, pointing down the hillside through a grove of olive trees. Avoletto? Dominic tried to remember where he had heard that name before. There's no countryside like this in Brooklyn. We must be in an Italian neighborhood in New Jersey. New Jersey? The older boy repeated slowly. He shook his head. "I have never heard of that village. But then I don't know of all the villages in Italy," he said. "Italy?" Dominic whispered. "Where else would we be?" the youngest boy replied with a smile, as 2 dimples appeared on his cheeks. Dominic was too stunned to answer. As he went over in his mind all that had happened that day, a chill raced down his spine. "Do you know an old man who lives in your village?" he asked. "Avoletto is full of old men," the middle boy answered. "They're the only men who are left here. They say that in some villages, so many people have gone that there's no one left to light the lamps. They have all gone to America. America? Yes, they say the streets in America are paved with gold. What can we infer that they believe about America? It's really rich. Like, you're going to have a better life if you go there because the streets are made of gold, right? Just so excessive, way over the top, but just a lot, really extra. Does that sound familiar at all, about the streets being paved with gold? It reminds me of that one book, I can't remember which one we read about immigration, though, and it talked about the true stories about people coming from other countries to America, and the people from Ireland thought the streets were paved with gold, too. Well, the oldest boy told him that. Then he turned to look over his shoulder. "Violetta," he called. "Violetta, where have you gone?" "Violetta," Dominic whispered. "A beautiful name, eh?" The boy's suntan face broke into a wide grin. "Wait until you meet her. She's a beauty." "What is your name?" Dominic asked. "Forgive us for not introducing ourselves sooner," the boy said. "These are my brothers. Antonio is 7, he said, pointing to the youngest boy with the blonde curls and dimples. "And this is Salvatore." "I'm 10 years old," Salvatore announced as he adjusted the net on his shoulder. Dominic felt another shiver race down his spine as he heard the last boy say, "And I'm Francesco Candiano." Does that shock you at all? I think we kind of knew that, right? We kind of started to piece it together, but still, how spine-chilling, like Dominic felt. Whew. Like to be like, oh, I'm actually talking to this person and his brothers who have died. Like what? How is this happening? I don't know either. Let's keep reading, then we got 2 more chapters. Chapter 9. Dominic fixed his eyes on the oldest boy. Wasn't Francesco Candiano the name of the old man he just heard on the display phone in the museum? But how could that be? "What year is it?" Dominic asked, hoping this question wouldn't sound too strange. Francesco shook his head. May the saints protect us," he said, rolling his big dark eyes to the sky and making the sign of the cross. "What was it?" he asked gently. "Some kind of accident?" What do you think Francesco's thinking right here? He probably hit his head and has a concussion or is hurt or something, doesn't remember what happened. He's like, "Oh, what was it?" he said gently. "An accident of some kind." So he's like, "You don't know what year it is, you don't know where you are. What's wrong with you?" Let's see what he says next. "Or maybe," Salvatore whispered, "Il Malocchio, the evil eye, has been placed on him." "I don't know what happened," Dominic tried to explain. "I was talking to an old man. It was so dark, and then I heard a rumbling noise and the ground began to shake. I don't remember anything after that." "Ah, so that's it," Francesco said. "The dark, the rumbling noise, the floor shaking. Don't you see? It must have been the earthquake down in Calabria." He turned to look at Dominic. "Is that why you're dressed so strangely? Have the gypsies dressed you?" Dominic was about to answer when Salvatore interrupted. "But the earthquake was a long time ago. Have you been wandering around like this since then?" "What year was it?" Dominic asked. "This year, of course," Francesco answered. "Yes, I know, but what year is this year?" Dominic's voice cracked with anxiety. "Just tell me what year it is," he begged. "It's 1908, Antonio squeaked. "Anyone knows that." So we went from, let's say, around 2000-ish to 1908. So he's gone back over 200 years, about 200 years. That is crazy. One last chapter. "Oh no," Dominic cried. "He's taken me back. The old man has taken me back into his dream." "I still say it sounds like Il Malocchio to me," Salvatore said, shaking his head. Antonio and Salvatore began to pick up stones from the ground. "Make sure there are 13 of them," Francesco ordered. He turned to Dominic and whispered, "Don't worry, we will fill your pockets." "What are you talking about?" Dominic asked. "If the evil eye has been placed on you," Francesco explained, "you need to wear a horn or carry 13 stones. 13 is a lucky number." It wards off evil. We have no horn, so you'll have to use the 13 stones. But I don't believe it was El Malochio. I think it was the earthquake. Confused by all the talk of evil eyes and earthquakes and the thought that he had somehow gone back in time, Dominic reached for his lucky key and let out a horrified cry when he discovered it was gone. Why do you think he let out that cry? Because, remember, it was the one thing he had from his family, so he was really protective of it. Why do you think it's gone? I think it's because he's gone back in time, and the key probably hasn't been made yet, right? Like, it was from his parents, so it probably hasn't been made yet. All right, so this key's gone, though. Poor Dominic. Calm down, Francesco said. You're very mixed up right now. No, you don't understand, Dominic protested. I've lost it. The only thing I've ever cared about. Yes, you've lost your family, I know, Francesco said gently. We three are orphans like you. We too have lost our parents. For a moment, Dominic forgot about his lost key and stared at Francesco and his brothers. He'd never met other orphans. He'd always been the only one in his class, whichever class he was in. As he stared, he noticed how these boys looked so dirty and unkempt. They looked much worse off than he had ever been. No, that's not what I meant, he answered. Listen to me. I'm not from here. This is all a dream. It's the old man's dream. If it is a dream, why don't you just wake up? Dominic thought this over and decided it was worth a try. Closing his eyes as tight as he could, he took a deep breath. All I had to do is will myself to wake up. I'm going to wake up now, and this is all going to be gone, and I'll be back at the museum, he whispered. Sitting perfectly still, Dominic concentrated as hard as he could. He counted to 10 and opened one eye. Francesco shook his head. Some dreamer, he said. This is the best you can do? If this were my dream, I'd have a pirate ship, silver swords, and a bowl of mussel soup, and some pasta with garlic sauce, and some sweet pantonette, sweet cake, for dessert. Oh no, Dominic moaned, opening his other eye. You're not real. I know you're not real. What the old men in the village say is true, Francesco shrugged. You live at the toe of the boot, and you go crazy from the stink. Boot? Toe? What are you talking about? Haven't you learned your geography yet? Even in a little hill town like Avaledo, we know of such things. This land is shaped like a boot, and Calabria, where you come from, is in the toe of the boot. We're going to pause there. Keep your finger in your book and go to the back. Remember where we found that map yesterday? A few pages in from the back. And if we look right there at the toe, you see how it kind of looks like a shoe, like a big tall boot. And there's like the heel. So if we follow it to the toe, we can see right there it says Reggio di Calabria, which is where they think that Dominic is from. And remember, they're from all the way up here. So they say if you live in the toe of the boot, you go crazy because of the stink. Just a saying that they have. And of course, I lost my page. There we go. But I never said I came from there, Dominic protested. I told you Sure, I know you're from a dream, Francesco said with a wave of his hand. Listen, mi amico, listen, my friend. The earthquake has given you a bad shock. Francesco gently placed his arm around Dominic's shoulder. That is enough to rattle anybody's head. He knocked on Dominic's forehead with his knuckles. How do we kind of know that Francesco doesn't believe Dominic so far? What has he done? On that last paragraph, he said, Sure, I know you're from a dream. So the wording there, but then his actions go even farther. A little wave of his hand. Like if I'm like, yeah, sure, you did all your math homework in 2 minutes. Sure. Right? So he's kind of just like, and he's kind of tapping him on the head, right? It's like, are you okay? Like, I don't think you're okay. So he's kind of giving these clues that he's like, I'm your friend, but I don't believe you. So Dominic leaned away from Francesco. He was not used to anyone touching him or being so familiar. Look out! Antonio suddenly shouted. Dominic had no sooner turned his head to look when he heard the jangle of a bell, and his face met with a blur of white fur. Francesco reached out to grab him as he was about to fall off the wall he had been sitting on. Dominic sat back up and found himself staring into the amused, dark eyes of a goat. "Violetta, I'm surprised at you," Francesco scolded. "Is that any way to greet a stranger?" "Is that what you were expecting?" I wasn't either the first time. I was like, wait, Violetta's like a goat? A goat, not a girl, a goat? Oh my gosh, what a beauty, eh? Just so funny. Dominic sat up with a start as the goat lowered her head demurely and began to lick his hand with her long, pebbly pink tongue. I just love that word choice there, that alliteration and that visualization, pebbly pink tongue. With a graceful upward motion, she raised her head back up and burped in his ear. With a shock, Dominic thought about how it had only been yesterday that he had been back at the museum, wishing for somebody to burp in his ear. Now it all seemed like light years away. There was so much that he didn't understand. How did he get here? How was he going to get back? Why were these boys filling their pockets with his pockets with stones? And who was this goat that was burping in his ear? Oh my goodness, so many questions. Oh, would you want a goat to burp in your ear? I sure wouldn't. I'd be like, stay over there. Goats. No, too stinky for me. All right, so let's take a look at our notebook page, friends. We are going to go over different character traits. Remember, character traits, we want to start getting past what we can see. We want to start getting to what's in their heart. How would you describe what they are like based off of their insides? We can do a few outside parts, but we really want to get to what they are like on the inside. So what do you think about Dominic? I think he is shocked, confused, and a little worried, right? Now we gotta think, where do we see this trait? We see it when Dominic keeps asking questions to the boys. Dominic keeps wondering where he is and how he will return. Right? Because he's like, how am I going to get back? What's going on? He's really worried, trying to figure it all out. None of those traits really tell me what he looks like. They're all those inside, those internal character traits. All right, so now let's think about Antonio. First, we know he's the youngest boy. I'm going to put this on the side. Do you remember how old Antonio was? He was 7 years old. Good. What is a character trait you know about Antonio? I know that Antonio is curious. I know this because he asks about the sea monster on Dominic's shirt, right? He's like, did you paint that yourself? He's almost kind of, he's still childish, right? He's still young. He's concerned about little things. Like, what's on your shirt? Whereas the other boys are like, where are you from? Where's your family? He's like, oh, tell me about your shirt. He's still really young. He's still childish. All right. Then we know we have Salvatore. And Salvatore is the middle, right? And he was, I think it said 10 years old, right? Where was it? I'm 10 years old, Salvatore said. Yep. So he's 10 years old. What do we know about Salvatore? I kind of know he's superstitious. I think I spelled that right. Close enough. Superstitious. You know what superstitious is? And he believes kind of in like that magic or like those other like things have to be exactly right. He thinks ill. He thinks ill mal o is on Dominic or the evil eye, right? He's like, oh no, he has this like evil eye, evil spirit around him. He's superstitious. And we don't know too much about Francesco. We don't really know his age, but we know he is the oldest, and he's about Dominic's age. Remember he said it looked like he was about as old as him? What's a good character trait for Dominic, or for Francesco? I noticed he doesn't really believe in him, right? In what Dominic's saying. So I would say he's skeptical. And what that means is he doesn't believe in it. He keeps reassuring Dominic that he had an accident, right? And he's like, it was the earthquake. But he's like, yeah, okay, yep, sure, no problem. He's pretty skeptical, right? Would you say he's a little funny almost too? I think so. He's like, we had to have exactly... He's a little superstitious too, though, isn't he? He's like, we had to have exactly 13 stones. Exactly. We don't have a horn, so we gotta use these 13 stones. So he's pretty superstitious too. We could add that if you want to. And if there's any other ones that you have, feel free to add them in too. Okay? So, that's what we did or what we're doing for class today. Then your homework for over the rest of this, and we'll go over this on Tuesday when we get back into school, is to do chapter 8, 9, and 10's questions. So describe here, I want you to describe how they look, one box for each boy. How are their situations similar to Dominic's? And who do we meet? Name everybody that we meet in this chapter, in chapter 8 only. What 2 things do the boys think may be wrong with Dominic? What year has Dominic traveled back in time to? Why do you think he has been taken back in time to this particular year? I know that question's a little silly there. Why do you think he has been taken back? Oh, no, that's right. Okay. And then 10. What explanation does Dominic give for what's happening to him? Why does Dominic say all this weird stuff is happening? And then this time, I want you to kind of explain. You live at the toe of the boot and you go crazy from the stink. We talked about that a little bit. Tell me, what do you think? What does that quote mean? Okay, so that's your homework. And I do want to remind you that your March reading calendars will be due when we come back into school, okay? You have until April 7th, which will be so the Wednesday we come back, so Tuesday and Wednesday to bring those in. But I wanted to remind you that those will be due. All right. Take care, friends. Bye.